top story this evening. Nigel Farage's bank account. Now, no doubt you're aware of this by now. He was all over the front page of the Daily Telegraph, this story today. His account was closed at Coutts because of his political beliefs. In a report by Coutts Bank, it said the committee found that it did not think continuing to bank with Nigel Farage was compatible with Coutts, given his publicly stated views that were at odds with our position as an inclusive organisation. Now, I think this is really shocking, actually, this story. And it all stems from this idea that we have environmental social governance rules, or ESGs, which form a large part, actually, of any corporation now, even small businesses. And it's the idea that the business has a moral compass, that they are the arbiters of what is and is not acceptable to say, to do, frankly, to think. So why are corporations taking these moral judgments on customers? Martin, let me start with you. What was your reaction when you heard that Coutts stopping Nigel's account wasn't because he didn't have enough money? They did try to say that for a little while. That was clearly a lie. It's because they don't like him.
Yeah, first of all, they said it was because of his financial situation. Then it was because he was a politically exposed person. Both of those were baseless lies. It's actually not social credit. This is moral credit. Yeah. This is financial institutions not approving of what you stand for and withdrawing finance. They put themselves above the state, above law in that sense, and they are making these choices based on this made-up concoction of inclusivity. It's so inclusive, isn't it, to kick customers out? That's the opposite of being inclusive. Now, we've had this kind of woke washing of capitalism for a long time now. We see it with all the big corporations, but we were able to cancel them if we didn't agree with them. Like if you see pride flags festooned everywhere in your local supermarket, you just don't go to them. If you find like Ben & Jerry's say, well, let's bring more refugees, and just don't buy their overpriced, fat-clogged ice cream. But this is corporations cancelling individuals. And Nigel, I think, has done the right thing by speaking out, because it's not just Nigel. Yeah. We've seen, like, trans parents groups, Our Future, thousands of parents who are concerned about transitioning in secret. A perfectly legitimate and valid concern, which is to be mandated in law by Kemi Badenoch today, having their accounts closed. Metro Bank cancelled Lawrence Fox. The Reclaim Party, when I went there, it was impossible to bank. And we saw this with Justin Trudeau, with the truckers in Canada. You're breaking a blockade on the vaccine, therefore, poof, we're just going to cut you off. You can't even finance yourself. So I think Nigel has been fantastic by speaking out, because this is an insidious trend we must stop. First, it's the leaders. Next, it'll be all of us. But
you see, of course, they would say, the bank would say, we are a private corporation. We are entitled to provide our services to people, anybody that we like. Who are you if you believe in the free market and you believe in capitalism? Who are you to say we should have this customer, we don't want this customer? Yeah, but then, as we've seen with Nigel, there's been 10 more banks. And so in the end, your credit rating is obliterated. And if you have the inability to bank, then you have the inability to function, to exist, to trade, to be a human, to be a free person. And I think, this Stasi-like mentality of let's face it, banks are hardly, the arbiters of pure morality. Exactly. I think that's what this is all about. They're trying to make themselves out to be the good guys. They're anything but the good guys. Yeah. Aaron, what do you make of it? Do they have a right as a bank to say, we want this customer, we don't want this customer because we don't like him? I mean, that is basically what they're saying. We don't want to... it was something about we don't want to be banking... We don't want... Nigel Farage banking with us will reflect poorly on the business. Do they have a right to say that?
Absolutely not. It's like saying, can a landlord say to somebody, well, on the basis of your political views, I will not allow you to be my tenant? That is clearly discrimination on the basis of consciousness. And I think we have a really interesting microcosm here of a real big problem, which is diversity in this country means I will embrace who you are, white, brown, black, gay, straight, man, woman, non-binary, doesn't matter, as long as you think what I think. Yeah. But the second we talk about diversity of thought, plurality of opinion, then the diversity stuff goes out of the window. And by the way, that matters as well for brown and black people, because they're more than tolerated in public space, but the second you deviate from the official narrative on things, you're in big trouble. There was Rupert Huck's comment about Kwasi Kwarteng. He can't really be black, he's a Conservative. That's right. Labour MP. That's right. An astonishing thing to say. So a few quick points. The fact that's happened is astonishing. It's unacceptable. The fact they seemingly lied to the BBC in a private briefing. The fact that the BBC then uncritically published that. This is all alleged, but I need to make those caveats. This story is explosive, and I would say to people who are on the left, don't ignore that just because it's Nigel Farage.
Well, they haven't just ignored it, they've actually signal boosted it and jumped on board in the pylons.
And applauded it.
Yeah, so people like Paul Mason, the sort of darling of the left, used to work for the BBC, former Labour Party parliamentary candidate, actually sticking up for Coutts. This bank where you have to have £1 million to get in. This guy called himself a socialist, and he's purely taken that political viewpoint because he doesn't like Nigel Farage. And listen, mate, they're coming for Nigel first, it'll be Corbyn next. It could be anybody, and that's the point. We should forget about our politics and look at the principle. If you have your life shut down by an institution because of your political beliefs, it won't stop with Nigel. It could go anywhere.
The thing is, and that's why I want to make this... I want us to focus on this concept of ESG and what that means for businesses. So ESG is... it is a criteria, basically, that has insidiously seeped into business. These are the 3 pillars of ESG. If you run a business, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because the idea that you have to practice in a way that is environmentally sound, so you have to reduce your carbon use, you have to reduce your greenhouse gas emissions, etc. Can you just put that graphic back up again for a minute, please? And also the idea that you have to have a social responsibility. So this is OK. We're all right with a lot of this. Employee benefits, workplace health and safety, adhering to labour laws. I think we would all agree those sorts of expectations have made the workplace safer for most people. And then you get onto this idea of governance, ethical business practices, avoiding conflicts of interest, perhaps, accounting integrity, but ethical business practices. Whose ethics, Martin? Because when you say then about it will come for the left, the ethics which are often inculcated within these environmental social governance documents are incredibly left-leaning.
Yeah, when you look at, was it 86 times it mentioned Brexit?
That's right.
And let's face it, 17.4 million people, the majority of Britain, agrees with Nigel Farage on Brexit. And they would be on, the same watch list. Yeah. These are mainstream beliefs. Supporting Djokovic. He was in the Wimbledon final on Sunday. He almost won. The greatest living tennis player who took a principled stand to not take the vaccine. Yeah. And he's entitled to do that. And
that is in the dossier. It was a dossier on Nigel Farage. Yeah. This is what Coutts had produced, and this is what Nigel was able to access from a subject access request. So who decides, Aaron? That's the idea, isn't it? I think it's so clever, this move, this global movement towards we've all got to think the same way. And it has infiltrated the businesses, and that's why these companies are taking decisions like this.
And it's bad for society as well. Again, even if you don't like Nigel Farage, because we can only have good ideas by having bad ones first. That might sound a bit strange, but Martin might have a policy. I say, Martin, you're wrong about that policy. Here's why. Martin might then be persuaded. He said, have you thought about this? And we can arrive at something which is actually a sensible way of administering a certain area of public life. So this idea of wrongthink, I mean, it's remarkably similar to the kinds of obsession you got with heresy in medieval Europe. You've broken the sacrosanct scriptures, therefore your opinions don't matter. That's a very big backward step from where we've been as a society, frankly, for more than a century.
Yeah. What should Nigel do now, do you think, Martin?
Well, he's done the right thing by just shining a massive spotlight. And they are naked in public now, Coutts. Yeah. They have to answer. The dossier was leaked to the Mail. It's out there. And if they had any form of crisis management, then they would have seen this come in. Was Nigel ever going to take this lying down? I mean, was he ever going to keep quiet about it?
They picked the wrong person, didn't they?
Precisely.
I mean, it made House of Commons today, this, in PMQs. I think we might have a clip, actually, of Rishi Sunak talking about it. We had Suella Braverman tweeted about it to say that it was outrageous that his bank account had been stopped. Let's just see if we've got this clip of...
It wouldn't be right if financial services were being denied to anyone exercising their right to lawful free speech. Our new Financial Services and Markets Act puts in place new measures to ensure that politically exposed persons are being treated in an appropriate and proportionate manner. And having consulted on the payment services regulations, we are in the process of cracking down on this practice by tightening the rules around account closures.
Rishi Sunak there was responding to a question by David Davis. Yeah. David Davis said the name Nigel Farage. Rishi Sunak, of course, didn't say Nigel Farage. He didn't go far enough, Aaron. He's still saying it's about being a politically exposed person.
Look, I'm not a Conservative voter. Just so your audience know, I would probably never vote Conservative. But I find it remarkable, after 13 years of Conservative government, banks can do this to people on the basis of Brexit. I find it absolutely incredible. Obviously, political parties are meant to govern for everyone. That's the ideal. They can't even do it for people that vote for them. I am perplexed. And one more thing, NatWest is owned 38% by the taxpayer.
That's right.
Yep.
So the idea that...
own Coutts.
Yeah, and the idea that this bank, of all the banks, can debank British subjects is mind-boggling.
The next big conversation, I think, is the diversity industry. It's a racket. It's got its tentacles all over public bodies. It's got its tentacles all over private enterprises. Now our banks, they're coming up with an arbitrary set of rules where they decide in private who's worthy and who's a heathen.
Yeah.
And they're kicked out on the basis of what? And we've got organisations like Stonewall and Mermaids. Next it'll be climate change. No doubt they've got all the details about where they sit on lockdowns, on Black Lives Matter. It's a Stasi-style dossier decided in private, and people are excommunicated with no payback. I'm so glad Nigel's gone up the ladder on this one.
I don't believe that everybody that sat in the room reading or coming up with that dossier agreed with what was being done, but why are people too cowardly now?
Because they want to keep quiet.
This isn't right.
They hope that they'll be the last to be fed to the crocodile. And that's what this industry is. It's a crocodile that devours. And it wants power, it wants money, it wants control, and it wants excommunication. And they've just picked on the wrong target.
Yeah, well, he's blown it wide apart, and all credit to him. Because the other thing that I think that comes out of this, Aaron, just briefly before we go to the break, is Coutts doing this have shown how they feel about the British public. Nigel Farage may not be popular with MPs in the House of Commons. He's popular with the British public. And so, in other words, Coutts don't like them either.
No, even if you only think, say, 20% of the British public like Nigel Farage, you're still talking, in excess of, 10 million people. And the thing that really gets me is this is a huge multinational. The communications aspect of it, of course he could do a subject access request. He can do a subject access request with anything that has his name on it within the company. Such a huge business making such a schoolboy error, shocking.
I think, Andrew, it was 52% like Nigel. Let's just be straight. Yeah.
Right, thanks, guys.